Sponsored by Surfshark. Coming off 2 weeks of smartphone detox, I knew I wanted to ease back into the always-connected lifestyle gently. So I decided to review a phone that still offered a little friction, one we're all familiar with because it's almost the exact same phone as last year. And because that could have been frightfully dull, I decided to review it in Paris. I'm MrMobile, and I spent a week at VivaTech on the 2025 Motorola Razr, the cheap one. This is the Motorola Razr.
It's Samsung.
It is Motorola. You might ask, why even bother reviewing a phone that's changed so little? Believe me, I ask that question a lot these days. Well, first and foremost, because of its price tag. This is the cheapest foldable you can get in the States, and despite its many compromises, it's the cheapest good foldable you can get almost anywhere. It's also the first Razr on Verizon in quite a while, and it's even cheaper there through the magic of subsidies. In my review of its more expensive sibling, the Razr Ultra, I heaped praise on its maker for embracing fun materials and colors, and that's even more true on the base model here. My review sample from Motorola arrived in this spring bud color, whose glowing pistachio is just as eye-catching as last year's international orange or whatever they called that. The grippy backplate keeps it firmly in your fingertips, no matter how much sweat or other wet you get on it. IP48 water and large ant resistance keeps that liquid outside of the casing, and within sits a wireless charging coil. No Qi 2, but the extra magnets in the Razr will anchor it effectively to some MagSafe docks. Now, those are higher-end features you don't typically find on entry-level flip phones, presumably enabled by Lenovo's buying power, as it's now sourcing many of the same components for all 3 Razrs in Motorola's lineup. Oh, and this phone offers both eSIM and physical SIM slots, meaning I could use it both on my native T-Mobile and on the review line Verizon lit up for me. I forgot how useful it can be to hop between 2 carriers in search of the best data speeds, and of course it's also quite handy for the international roaming you'll see in a sec. The phone's redesigned titanium hinge is tighter than ever, but that's not the friction I talked about in my intro. Coming from my light phone experience, I wanted my digital re-tox to be gradual, so the need to open the Razr to do anything serious was appealing. And while I'm normally a big proponent of using the huge cover screen to run any and every app you want, this time I limited the apps allowed to run out here. I wanted to focus on utility instead of time sinks, so social media was out, while tools like Todoist, Voice Recorder, and messaging apps were in. I also disabled some of the more distracting functions that wake the outer display, and replaced Motorola's default launcher with Niagara. Thus, properly prepared to prevent piss-poor performance, I thought, I loaded up my boarding pass and popped over to Paris. That brings us to the road trip review segment for our camera samples, tagged in the lower left as applicable, as always, and captured at and around VivaTech, which also provided travel and lodging for the purpose. Now, VivaTech claims the title of the largest tech and startup trade show in Europe, which turned out to be a very challenging environment for the Razr's mid-range camera system. Trade shows are punishing on every aspect of a phone, of course. Lighting is rarely ideal, good audio is nigh impossible, networks are overloaded, so the phone needs to work harder to keep a connection, which saps battery and generates more heat. Stay tuned on that. About the only advantage the Razr had in all this was its cover display viewfinder, which meant I could use its primary cameras instead of its inner selfie sensor when I wanted to frame myself up. This would later also help out when capturing obligatory influencer angles of the City of Light and its various attractions. Motorola has never been known as a camera king, and this phone will do nothing to change that. Watch as my footsteps land with mini earthquakes. Marvel at the flesh tones turning to cartoons in low light. Watch as focus drifts with the slightest provocation, and play a spirited round of spot the frames as they drop constantly from almost every 4K video. Do you enjoy smooth ramps between zoom settings? This phone doesn't. It does a little better in photo mode, but color science is still weird. And no matter what mode you're in, performance is slow. The phone usually snapping a shot or starting a clip a second after you hit the shutter. I'll share some more samples that can speak for themselves as we push forward. You'll be unsurprised to learn that AI was the inescapable buzzword at VivaTech. It powered cameras that analyze your face to determine how you really feel about a product you're holding in your hand, and also systems that can extrapolate wind patterns for an entire regatta race course, relevant to my interests, using only 3 sensors on shore. But to come back to the phone, what surprised me was my experience with AI on the Razr. I was mostly solo for most of the week, with ample time to explore the city, so I began to use Gemini Live as a kind of travel buddy. First, it was a tour guide, telling me about points of interest I took pictures of and suggesting stops based on preferences I was just sort of rattling off the cuff.
These gates were once part of the Tier Wall, a 19th century fortification. Oh wow, the Eiffel Tower. It looks like you're getting a great view from here. Are you planning to go up to the top?
Then we got into debates about some of the sites I was seeing, going back and forth about the history of the French Revolution and Art Nouveau architecture.
And it's said to have a few different symbolic meanings.
And before I knew it, I'd been talking to Gemini for the better part of an hour about everything from Star Trek episodes set in Paris, to the design of large language models, to the dangers of addiction posed by these convincing talking robots. In fact, Gemini became so useful that I promoted it to a cover screen app. And yet my experience was also a reminder that these AI tools are deeply unreliable narrators. Over the course of an hour, Gemini suggested I visit museums that had already closed for the day, even though I told it the time more than once. It recommended a restaurant that has either been replaced or never existed, and it thought the current date was 2 weeks later than it was, so it told me the wrong sunset time. Well, that was a lovely conversation, but Gemini severely underestimated the travel time if you're on foot. If these sound like familiar foibles, yep, they're the same errors committed by the ill-fated humane AI pin over a year ago. Errors endemic to the technology powering this stuff. So while I'm more interested in large language models than before due to their increasing utility, I still think applications like chatbots are better toys than tools at this juncture. For my thoughts on Motorola's own AI suite, see my Razr Ultra review. And for those more bullish than me about this stuff, the Razr does offer Perplexity and other preloaded solutions with a variety of trial offers. You might have already clocked this, but me walking around Paris talking to an LLM for an afternoon doesn't exactly square with my stated desire to use this phone less. Yeah, neither Niagara nor my cover screen strategy worked to curtail my obsessive usage. I was in trade show mode and road trip review mode, filming and notating, posting and scrolling. Still, I'm happy to say I did hold on to some of the lessons learned during my light phone experience. I'm more aware of my impulse to reach for my phone in moments of downtime, and less likely to succumb to it now without a good reason to do so. But that has everything to do with my 2-week detox, and nothing really to do with the Razr. The friction the Razr did offer was the less useful kind. Performance slowing to a crawl as it hit its thermal limits, which it did often in the early summer heat of Paris. Anytime a phone does this, I'm reminded of the bad old pre-Project Butter days of Android, with weird lags and crashes and hinky bits that just don't happen on most phones anymore. Now, Motorola is doing well with the Razr, outselling Samsung in the flip category in the US, but it risks losing that lead if it doesn't optimize its software. A sleek little phone like this, a true achievement in hardware, shouldn't have software that feels this bloated and buggy. Still in all, it's a foldable with 5G, with a huge cover screen and the might of a major manufacturer behind it, for $600 or less. I don't think it'll lead to a sudden wave of new foldable adoption or anything like that. Those were hopes that sadly didn't bear fruit over the last few years of similar releases, at least not to the extent that I wanted them to. But I continue to love this category enough that the more options at the more price points that people can experience, the better. I used to think VPNs were only for people doing shady stuff online, until I started spending over 100 days a year on the road. This video is sponsored by Surfshark, which I use to keep my browsing between me and the site I'm visiting. Why does that matter? Well, it lets me keep watching my favorite shows even when I'm out of the country. It lets me shop in the currencies I'm used to, bank the same way I always do, and for the same selection of content I'm used to seeing. And when I travel to countries that restrict access to certain sites, like the ones I need to do my job, Surfshark keeps me in business. In short, it's a tunnel to the internet I need that follows me wherever my travels take me. Secure your privacy with Surfshark. Go to surfshark.com/MrMobile and use code MrMobile at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. This video was produced following a week with the Razr 2025 review sample provided by Motorola and filmed in part at VivaTech in Paris, for which VivaTech provided travel and lodging for MrMobile. No company was given copy approval or editorial oversight into this content, nor an early preview. This is a review, not a commercial. Check out my recent Razr Ultra and Lightphone 3 reviews to see what else I've been doing for the past month, and stay tuned for Nintendo Switch 2 coverage and, of course, more flippin' foldy boys coming soon. Till next time, from Michael Fisher, thanks for watching. And stay mobile, my friends.